Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me with the Parents Know Best Education Initiative at FreedomWorks. Today, Vernadette Broyles is joining B.E.S.T to discuss her efforts to protect children's health and defend parental rights in the courts and more. Vernadette is the President, General Counsel, and founder of the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. She is an experienced litigator. She graduated with honors from Yale University with a Bachelor of Science degree in biology and received her law degree from Harvard Law School. It is an honor to have you with us today, Vernadette.
Thank you so much, Tamra. So glad to be with you.
Thank you. So you launched and lead an organization called the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. And your mission is to defend the well-being of children against the dangerous ideology of SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity, in schools and restore the rights of parents to direct the care, education, and upbringing of their children, which is so fundamental for parents. So first and foremost, Vernadette, what drew you into the work that you're doing?
Sure. Thank you, Tamra. And just to be clear, we really focus our efforts on gender identity because, and I guess to get to your question, I had been a guardian ad litem for children for a number of years, appointed by the court to represent the best interests of children in court, as well as a family law practitioner. So I worked with families and children for many, many years. And having a biology background and a research background, I came across this issue of gender identity and transgenderism and through detransitioners. And as I was reading a story, it was a young man who asked this question: why is it that the adults in my life did not stop me when I started to go down this road? And for some reason, that question pierced me to my heart. I began to research the medical literature concerning this assertion of a transgender identity. And what I found, again, with having a biology background, I was appalled to find how poor the evidence was in support of the idea of medically, physically transitioning a child away from their biological sex, away from biological reality, and the set point of the operating instructions that is found in their blueprint, in their DNA. The idea that we would be hijacking a child's natural development and placing them on a path to medicalization, which was, in my mind, abusive and was certainly not helping whatever mental health issues that they were facing. So bottom line, I felt the need to shut my private practice down and to create an entity that I found just didn't exist, a nonprofit law firm that was solely devoted to protecting children's health and defending parental rights against this misleading and destructive ideology. And so now we are 4 attorneys, we have 4 staff people, and we are in 3 different states, and we have lawsuits around the country.
Thank you. Oh, it's heartbreaking, and we're just so grateful that you're in the fight for parents. So what are just some of the highlights from a few of the child and parental rights cases that you've taken on that you are able to talk about?
Yes. Well, our first case was actually a Title IX case here in the Northern District of Georgia. Most of our cases are in federal court. There was a little girl who was sexually assaulted in the bathroom, in the girls' bathroom, by a gender fluid boy that was allowed to be there because of a transgender access policy that parents were actively opposing at the school board meetings and warning that this sort of thing would happen. And that's exactly what happened. So we are deep into that case now here in Georgia. We have several cases now, 2 in Florida and 1 in Massachusetts, in which children were transitioned to something other than the biological sex without the knowledge or consent of the parents. In one case, the Little John case in the Northern District of Florida, a 12-year-old child was instructed to meet with several adults at school, parents not invited, to create a gender support plan. And I'm trying to be very deliberate so your parents, to give your parents information as we go along. If you encounter these gender support plans, there are these long documents that ask children questions like, what pronoun do you want to use? What name do you want to be called? What bathroom do you want to use? With whom do you want to sleep? When we travel with the school. And the worst question of all is, how do you want us to refer to you when your parents are around versus when they're not around?
Unbelievable.
That is actively conspiring with a child to defy and deceive their own parents.
Yes.
It's reprehensible. In the Massachusetts case, there was a non-binary librarian who actively proselytized, actively recruited children into this identity crisis. And the children there were two, a son and a daughter, were transitioned over the active objections of their parents. So, and then finally, the other case in Florida was a little girl of very Catholic, devoted parents, who was meeting or was asked to meet with the school counselor for weeks, privately, unknown to the parents, in which they transitioned the child. They purposely did not tell the parents because they knew that it would be contrary to the parents' faith. The little girl, the parents found out because the little girl attempted suicide at school. And the parents arrived at school only to see her daughter being taken away by an ambulance.
Oh, awful. Just horrible.
The case is that when we have a case that is still going in Arizona where the parents had lost custody to Child Protective Services. The parents had taken the child after a suicide attempt to a mental health hospital. Again, I'm telling these are fact patterns that are reproduced all across the country. So if your parents are hearing this, pay attention to the fact patterns because they're very common. They're symptomatic.
Yes.
Are representative. A suicide attempt that the child attempts, which by the way are, the internet instructs our children how to go down this path. And parents take the child to the emergency room, to a mental health facility. In that facility, the child is affirmed in a assumed identity. And then Child Protective Services is called in. The parents lose custody of this child. And it's been 2 years that we now have the hope of getting this child back.
Wow. It's just unbelievable. And it's all happened so fast, this shift toward these types of activities. And it seems to just be starting as well with the continual question that teachers ask students. What are your pronouns?
Right.
And have they changed? Have your pronouns changed? I want to ask you again, have your pronouns changed?
Yeah.
And the power of suggestion, and the power of suggestion by trusted adults planting those seeds of thought in little kids' minds, it makes them wonder. You think about how children think. I mean, I've raised 2 kids. If someone is asking that's an adult, and my mom says the teacher, I need to listen to my teacher, then how is the child not going to take that seriously and think, oh, I guess I need to change my pronouns? And so it just opens up this door, doesn't it, in the thinking and the thought processes within the children. And then they're all talking about it on the playground. And, well, what are your pronouns? What are mine? And this whole peer pressure dynamic comes in. And then it's this slippery slope very quickly down to actually transitioning these children. And it truly is child abuse in my estimation. So talking about sexual orientation and gender ideology in schools, again, it just seems to be one of the most, if not the most, egregious violations of parental rights in schools. And with gender transitioning therapies encouraged in schools and more. So what is the best legal defense for this, in your opinion, Vernadette?
Right. And again, just to be clear, we don't typically deal with the sexual orientation aspect of this. We know that other organizations do. But many times they're lumped together. So it's sort of inevitable that the parent is having to deal with one or the other. It's the transgender issue that we feel is very purposely circumventing the authority and the adult maturity of parents to take advantage of the developmental disabilities of children. Children are not adults. Their whole sense of identity is still in formation because their bodies are still forming. They're in a formative process physically as well as psychologically. They're still learning what reality is.
Yes.
And so it is using that disadvantage that they have, that vulnerability they have, to, as you say, suggest, sow seeds of questioning of reality, or even a distorting of reality. And that is what's happening at schools.
Yes.
Which is why, for parents, we work with parents in all parts of the political spectrum. Conservative, liberal, in between, libertarian. Because this issue it doesn't discriminate between children. It's really attacking. It's really, I'm going to say attacking, targeting children of all kinds, but oftentimes when they're most vulnerable. So what are parents' best legal defense? There's a whole litany of things. You cannot simply wait until the place in which you have a lawsuit. If you waited till then, you've waited too late. The best curative medicine starts with preventative medicine. All right. So if you can bear with me briefly, I'd like to walk through for your audience sort of the series of things to do and to put in place to hope to never allow it to get to a lawsuit. Because once you're there, you're talking about nuclear war for your family. And which is fine if we have to do it. But first of all, parents need to resolve our identity crisis. For too long, for decades now, we have been on a slow slide where we have slowly more and more outsourced our parenting and the raising of our children to third parties.
Good point.
That's just got to stop. And in terms of then, and what has come with that is a psychological slide where we have ceded more and more of the authority over our children, and even the thought that someone else knows best to somebody else, to a third party. We have to reacquire a sense of our identity as parents, which means our authority as parents and our responsibility as parents to be the primary educators, those who, the decision makers, medical, mental health decision makers, and every aspect. Because why? Because we are the people who know them the best and love them most. We have parents. If you have an instinct, you have a instinct within you. When something is not right for your child, trust it. Trust it. And then do your research. Number one. Number two, know what's going on at school. More and more schools have been excluding parents, and we have just simply allowed it because we've become busy, we've become distracted, we're involved in our career, whatever the case may be. We need to become present once again in school and know what's going on. Be talking with our children. Know who's at that school and what is going on there. GSA clubs. They used to be called Gay Straight Alliance clubs. They're now Gender Sexuality Alliance clubs. They are the canary in the coal mine. A very active GSA club is an indication that there is probably something going on in your school that is proactively promoting gender identity. Blessing clubs and other similar clubs. Third, communicate to your school in writing your parental instructions and your family's beliefs. We have created, in fact, I'm finalizing this morning because we want to start releasing it in a very wide way. It's something we call our parental notice concerning our child and issues related to gender identity ideology at school. And it lists here that, first of all, that you are asserting your constitutional rights, and then a whole list of things that you're demanding immediate notice should your child begin to assert an alternate identity or express gender confusion. And then all the various things that you do not consent to as a parent. You do not consent to your child to be taught gender identity ideological principles. You do not consent to your child meeting with adults at school without your knowledge. You do not consent to anyone at the school instructing or addressing their gender identity issues at school, period. You just simply do not consent.
Yes.
You do not consent to your child, I'm going down the list here, socially transitioning in any form or fashion at school. And it explains that social transitioning is not a benign intervention. It is a very serious mental health decision. And that you, as the legal decision maker for your child, must give consent and must be notified. It lays all this out. And then you do not consent to your child being referred to a counselor, psychologist, or even someone that comes into the school to provide these services. They have to get your consent.
Yes.
And then it requires prior notice to any instruction happening in school, and instructs that your child is to be given alternate instruction during such activities at school that involve gender identity ideology. So it CCs the school counselor, because Tamra, the school counselor's office is the most dangerous place at the school.
Yes, yes, it is.
Unfortunately, libraries are becoming the second most dangerous, which is bizarre because I'm a huge reader.
Right.
But the school counselors are often the place, they are often the most activist person on campus. So you see through the school counseling.
Yes.
Have it delivered and sent by email. If you get pushback from the school, or you get in wind that there's something happening at that school involving your child, I would send it again, this time via certified mail, and this time copy the superintendent of the district and the chairman of the school board and your family's attorney, Esquire, or the name of their law firm.
That's
you want to
great.
make it clear. I'm going to stop here with this, but
Yes.
you want to make it clear that your family is not the kind of family that is ignorant of their rights or is reticent to assert them in order to protect your child.
Excellent. And Vernadette, I think you have those resources on your website, don't you? I want to make sure.
This one is not, because we simply don't want it, frankly, we don't want it to readily fall into the hands of those who are opposed to our
well, good. Then
we'll give it out. Certainly anyone contacts us,
yes.
It's now prepared, and we will happily send it to people.
Okay, great. So we will make sure that your website is connected with this resource. And if you're watching right now, it will be in the related post, where you can reach out to child and parental rights and obtain this resource so that you can take those steps to connect with your school, and if need be, the superintendent and or school board, and just that whole process. This is a time for us to be bold and courageous as parents, and polite. Being angry it might be something we feel, and it's very justifiably felt, but not necessarily effective in your approach with dealing with your school or your school board. But courage is critical in this hour, and take all that love that you have for your children and all that concern and turn it into action to fight back against this agenda, as Vernadette has given, just such great advice on how to do that today. And so do you have anything else that you want to share with the parents, advice, encouragement, for those who are just concerned and, their heads spinning about what to do, and maybe they're just wondering, is there one of these transgender or non-conforming gender 6-page plans on their child? For example, FERPA, the federal law that requires schools to allow parents to look at all records. That means anything written down at the school related to their child. And certainly that would apply to these plans, or to, as you mentioned, counselors. The counselors' notes, those are written down. Parents have the legal right to ask for those, and yet we know they're being turned away and snubbed when they do try to find out. So any advice along those lines? Sure.
Several things. Number one, in this letter that you write, or any communications that you write, also put the school district on notice as to how this violates your faith. Okay, and your child's faith. Any of these actions would, and this ideology does. Why? Because ultimately, if it turns out that you do have to seek a lawsuit, and I would say reserve that for a situation in which if they really do access your child in an improper way and influence your child in an improper way, and it begins to cause harm, and you start to have to incur expenses because of that, then that's when you want to consider it a lawsuit. The beauty of a notice like this and communications like this is that it has put them on notice.
That's good.
And you're setting up then parental rights causes of action and free exercise causes of action. All of this is laying the groundwork if necessary. Secondly, understand that many school officials actually are quite uncomfortable with this whole ideology as well. So don't immediately assume that the school is adversarial or the principal. You might be surprised that, again, if you are classy and tactful as you assert your rights, that you may find there's more of a receptiveness to your concerns that you may have realized. All right. Take things incrementally, ratchet it up as necessary. Thirdly, you can also ask for your child's records. If you, again, are beginning to suspect, there's some flags here I don't like, you can ask for your child's records. You're entitled to them under FERPA, and ask for all communications with your child, all emails. We have found in our discovery smoking guns in the emails between
Great point.
teachers and our children. Thirdly, if you suspect that there's something systematically going on in the school, get together with other parents and do an open records request. And we have sample open records requests that you can also contact us through our website, info@childparentrights.org. And then finally, there's a lot of discussion, and we don't have time for this, Tamra. Maybe that's another interview broadcast we could do. But if the school district is interpreting Title IX to say, oh, well, we just have to affirm your child, in their assumed identity. We have no choice. We can't listen to to you and your parental rights. That is not accurate. A lot of attorneys are getting this wrong, but it's not accurate. And we remind the school that Title IX is merely a federal law. It is subject to constitutional law, and our constitutional rights supersede how you may be interpreting Title IX. Title IX does not erase my constitutional fundamental parental right.
Excellent
so these
point.
are some of the final thoughts I would share with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vernadette, for joining me today and joining B.E.S.T. and helping us equip parents so that they can be more effective in fighting for their rights and for their children in education. So we appreciate you, and we'll hope to talk with you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tamra.